Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is in Eau Claire on the campus of Chippewa Valley Tech College, interviewing State Senator Kathleen Vinehout. She's from Alma. She's a Democrat seeking re-election in Senate District 31. Kathleen, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
My pleasure to be here.
Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Kathleen, you've focused on a lot of things with your PhD in healthcare, but let's talk about rural schools, because that's at the heart of much of what you've been working on. What needs to be done in the next session to help rural schools, please?
We need to fund Tony Evers' fair funding for our future. His proposal that was in the 2013-15 budget that the governor and the majority in the legislature decided to pull out and not fund. We also need to fund an increase in sparsity aid, which is a categorical aid that I added to the budget back in 2007. We increased it in 2009. It was cut in 2011 and cut again in 2013. It is aid that goes directly to the rural schools. They can use it for anything they need. There are no strings attached to it. And we also need to better fund high-cost transportation districts that have students in a very sparse area and are spending, as a proportion of their budget, very large amount on transportation. Right now, the state spends about 6 cents on every dollar that the rural schools are spending on transportation, and it's breaking the backs of the rural schools.
A big discussion in the next budget is going to be over the future of choice schools and vouchers. Your position on those, Senator?
I do not think that the vouchers should have been expanded statewide. I used that money when I wrote my alternative budget in the last budget to put into schools. I do not think that the cap should come off. I think that it's a very big mistake to go down the road of funding two alternative school systems. One, our public schools, and a second, parallel system, private schools. I think that's a very big mistake. It's definitely not something we can afford in the next budget. And you've seen the headlines as well as I have. The next budget is going to be very, very tight.
Before I ask you about that deficit, one more schools-related issue. This summer, the governor called for Wisconsin to withdraw from Common Core. Your position on that?
I believe that Common Core is a local decision. This is an example of something the governor was for before he was against. You'll recall that the majority members that voted for the budget and the governor that proposed the budget included money to pay for testing every single high school student using the ACT and testing a number of the grade school students using Smarter Balanced. The Smarter Balanced test, these two tests were put in place to evaluate how well the students were doing at meeting the Common Core objectives. So this is completely politically driven. Common Core is something that's being discussed at every school district. It's a decision that should be kept locally.
Now let's talk about that potential deficit. The Fiscal Bureau said in the next biennium it could exceed $1 billion. How should any potential deficit be fixed?
Actually, I heard it could exceed $1.8 billion.
I think it was 1.76, but go ahead.
There you go. And that does not include some sufficient programs that we don't yet have numbers on, including Medicaid, which you and I have talked a lot about, and the other some sufficient programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit, Homestead Exemption Tax Credit. So there are a number of numbers that are not in yet, but definitely going forward we have some major problems. Part of the problem is that corporate tax returns right now are down 9%. That is huge. And I believe it has to do with the changes that the governor made and the legislature made back in 2011 and in 2013, where we're looking at certain companies that pay almost nothing, and by 2016 it will be virtually nothing in terms of their corporate income tax, and that is in the manufacturing and ag sector. It costs the state, when it's fully funded, about $170 billion annually. So a lot of money. What to do? Big problems. Number one, we need to accept the federal government's Medicaid money. Going into the next budget, the Fiscal Bureau estimates, there's a range of estimates, but one of the estimates is that this would bring in $315 million in cash and cover 87,000 people. In addition, we need to make major changes in Medicaid. Medicaid is the fastest growing part of the state budget. The governor put $1 billion new into it in the 2011 budget and another $850 million in the 2013-15 budget. When you think about that, this is the fastest growing part of state government. It's the largest part when you consider all funds, roughly $20 billion out of $70 billion 2-year biennial budget. So what do? We need to rein in administrative costs. We need to renegotiate the contracts with both the fiscal intermediary and the HMOs. We need to hold the HMOs accountable for meeting benchmarks on high-cost drivers. For example, pregnant women that go in to make their delivery without ever having any prenatal care, children that are not immunized, diseases that could be prevented or controlled better, like making sure the HMOs have every single person see a primary care physician at least once a year, making sure that those people that have diabetes have foot care coverage. Simple things, but things that right now the Medicaid system is so opaque, so difficult to see through that the state can't even tell the legislature what the cost drivers are in Medicaid. So that's number one.
Well, but the American Hospital Association says our Medicaid reimbursement rates are second lowest in the nation. Do we need to raise those?
Yes, but to do that, we're going to have to come up with a funding source. And I might add, not only do we need to raise the Medicaid reimbursement rates for the hospitals, but we also need to raise them for the nursing homes. And there's a reason why right now the healthcare providers are strapped for cash, and it has to do with the changes at the federal level in the reimbursement for the federal Medicare program for people over 65. Now, when those reimbursement rates were dropped, it was much more difficult for healthcare to cost shift from Medicaid to the Medicare patient. So right now there's a crunch. I talked with a number of nursing homes in my district, and they say, nursing homes are going to close. In our district, Arcadia already closed. We're looking at other nursing homes that are going to close. So we're going to have an access problem both with rural hospitals and with rural nursing homes. So absolutely we have to deal with that. But to deal with finding the funds for that, we have to accept the Medicaid money, and we absolutely have to reorganize the way that the whole Medicaid system is being administered.
Let's go to transportation funding.
If I could just add a footnote.
I only gave you a chance for point one, and so give me point two.
I have 6 points, and I have added up all these dollars.
Okay, go ahead.
So let me just give you the highlights.
It's a big part of your re-election campaign. Go ahead.
Well, it's just something that every legislator needs to think about. How are you going to deal with this deficit? We have to not expand the voucher program. We have to get rid of the existing statewide vouchers and repeal the $30 million property tax giveaway to parents who have children in private schools.
Tax deduction.
Tax deduction, that's right. We need to change the tax code, reverse some of the tax changes that were made in the 2011 and 2013 budget. One of them I think of are some of the income tax changes. Another one has to do with basically the giveaway to manufacturing in the manufacturing tax credit. We have to slow down what we're doing what the state's doing in terms of giving away tax credits. There were another $75 million that were put into tax credits in this past budget. When we look at where those tax credits are going, we see companies that not only do not agree to have their current number of employees capped during the life of that tax credit, but have agreed to possibly in their contract lose half of their employees.
You're talking about the Ashley example.
And still take advantage of the tax credits.
Ashley Furniture.
Well, this is one, but I have asked the Audit Bureau to look at any other contracts that have the same type of arrangement. So to go back to how we use our dollars wisely, we need to make sure that anybody that gets a tax credit for a job, that job was actually created. Pretty simple. We need to slow the increase in corrections, and I could talk to you a long time about what needs to be done in terms of dealing with mental illness and alcoholism and drug dependency in the corrections system. We need to put more money into alternatives to incarceration. And finally, we need to remove the shift of money. If you include the general obligation bonds, $400 million that went from the general fund into the transportation fund. And to resolve the problem in the general fund, we have to deal with the problem in the transportation fund.
Projected $600, $700 million over the next biennium. Would you consider raising the gas tax, raising the $75 you and I pay to register our vehicle?
Well, the first two, yes. There are a number of options on the table, but the first two, just if we return to indexing and if we raise the registration fee by $10, that's not going to get us close to the amount of money that we need to deal with.
The $10 increase in the $75 fee only raises $45 million.
That's correct. And I just got a paper yesterday to tell me that.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. So what we need to do is have a comprehensive look at what the projects are and make some decisions. The simple answer to the problems in the transportation fund is that too much money is going out, not enough money is coming in. It's a long-term problem. It's not going to be solved right away, but we need to take steps to do that, and we certainly need to have a plan. And those two options are on the table, but I would say we need to look at alternatives to how we register vehicles. Should a fellow that buys a $89,000 Tesla, should that fellow pay the same as my brother who buys a $2,000 Chevy? I'm thinking maybe not. We need to look at some of those options.
The bill to legalize medical marijuana is going to come back, and now Colorado and the state of Washington are legalized recreational marijuana. Your positions on those?
Well, I think that there's a path to legalizing medicinal marijuana. It's something I never did support, but it's definitely changing in my district. I've got 80-year-old farmers coming up to me and saying, hey, this is just silly. We need to get this done. So I think it's not as much of a hot-button issue as it was years ago. That said, I think we need to work with the law enforcement to make sure that whatever we do create, whatever kind of regulatory system we create, that we've got a system in place that is enforceable. I think Colorado has a good model. I don't think we're ready as a state to legalize recreational marijuana, but I do think that there is a path to beginning to legalize medicinal marijuana. And I would say I've talked with a number of people, including parents of children, that have said, let's figure out how we can do this.
No district in the state Senate has more frac sand mines than yours. Are they generally working, or is there some type of legislation that needs to be passed next session on the issue of frac sand mines?
Well, I think first we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books. The stormwater runoff, the air pollution, the water pollution, the high-capacity wells. Talking with people that are working with sand mines at the county level, I am hearing that DNR is not enforcing existing rules, and the one person they had assigned to work on sand mines has been removed and sent to another part of the department. You may remember that the legislature had 2 additional positions that was in the budget to regulate sand mines. The DNR at that time had said that they needed 12. I and Chris Dano wrote a bill, and also I had a budget amendment to add those additional 10, but neither evidently has been done. Evidently, the 2 positions that were authorized haven't been filled, and this is what I'm hearing from the counties. The 10 positions that we found a funding source for, that bill was never approved. So to begin with, we got to enforce existing law, and I don't think that's happening.
Okay, 2 final questions quickly because we're almost out of time. Despite our potential deficit problem, are you still backing your plan for 2 years of tuition and fees absolutely free to Wisconsin residents who attend our tech colleges and 13 extensions?
Well, it's certainly not something that can be done in the next budget. And that was a plan that I put forward when I talked about dealing with the surplus. And I found that my colleagues absolutely were going to spend the surplus. They wanted to spend it on changes in the income tax code. And I said, hey, let's talk about a relatively modest investment and take the balance of that, which at the time was almost $900 million, and put that balance into the rainy day fund. My amendment amendment was voted down, and I still think it's a good idea, but looking at the budget right now, definitely can't be done in the 15-17 budget. I think it's more important right now that we think about how to change around the way we pay for schools. And when I was outlining how I would deal with the budget, one of the things I had in mind was how we're going to begin to change the way we pay for schools.
First offense, drunken driving. Should it be a crime?
It should not be a felony, and part of that problem right now that we're facing is the huge cost of corrections. The state is spending more money right now on corrections in state dollars than the state's spending on the University of Wisconsin system. We are all mixed up when it comes to dealing with drunk driving, when it comes to dealing with alcohol problems, when it comes to dealing with drugs. What I suggest we do is fully fund the drug court programs across the state, including dealing with alcohol, first offense alcohol in that form, and let's give it a chance to work. We definitely know it's working in Eau Claire, it's working in La Crosse. Let's see it work statewide and then come back and evaluate whether or not it needs to become a felony.
Then finally, you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponent on November 4th, Senator?
Well, you know my background. I have a background in health. I spent 10 years teaching health policy at the university level. I spent 10 years milking cows on the dairy farm, and prior to those two jobs, I spent 10 years working in the healthcare industry in a variety of jobs. I have 2 different terms in the Senate. Both of those terms I've been active in figuring out ways to deal with the problems that we've mentioned today, including the budget. I've written 2 alternative budgets in the last 4 years to show that there are possible ways to take care of the problems that the state faces within the existing framework, without raising taxes, using the same dollars to balance the budget. I spent a lot of time working on trying to make sure state programs work as my role in chair of the audit committee and also as ranking minority member on the audit committee. I don't think that my opponent can say that he's got that kind of experience.
I understand. Thank you. State Senator Kathleen Vinehout of Alma is a Democrat seeking re-election in the 31st Senate District. Senator, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
My pleasure.
Thank you.